So now let's listen to a story about a boy just like you. He is traveling with his family when he feels thirsty. So he asks for some water, but all the water is gone. So he prays to God to give him some water. Suddenly, he can hear something. What can he hear? He thinks he might be hearing water. So he runs towards the sound and he finds a beautiful river there, along with greenery everywhere. What does he do next? Well, he runs towards the river to drink some water. And he thinks, this is an amazing place to settle down. Well, that is exactly what they do. The Aryans, after coming to India, decided to settle in the northwestern part of India, which was called the Sapta Sindhu, during 1800 BCE to 1500 BCE. This was called the Sapta Sindhu because Sapta means 7 and Sindhu means river, and it had 7 rivers in the area: Indus, Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Beas, Satluj and Saraswati. This was indeed a beautiful place which was later called as Brahmavarta, or the abode of gods, or where the good people lived. So now let's find more about the people in the early Vedic age. So now imagine you have a time machine, and from that time machine you come to this early Vedic period and hide behind a tree. You notice that there are several people gathered around a man who's dressed like a king. So you think, were these people governed by a king? Well, that's exactly it. They were governed by a Rajan, who was their tribal leader. So the Aryans lived in various tribal groups, and each tribal group had a grama, or a village. Grama or a village, right? So who selected the Rajan? Was he just an outsider? Where did he come from? Well, the people of the Grama selected amongst them bravest and the strongest guy, and he became the Rajan of the tribe. And so he had to take all the important decisions and protect his village. Now you notice that some people are giving something to the Rajan. Why are they doing so? Well, this is known as gifting of Bali. Bali was a kind of voluntary donation made to the Rajan by the people because they genuinely respected and loved him for all of his hard work. So you see how different this generation was compared to ours. Well, today the people living in India have to pay compulsory taxes, which was so much more different than how these people lived, because they could just give voluntary gifts to their Rajan because they really wanted to. So now you see that the Rajan has been surrounded by some new people. They seem to be really important because he's taking advice from them. So let us see who these people are. Well, reading the conversations, I think we'll be able to understand better who they are. Well, firstly, there is the Purohita, who is talking to the Rajan regarding all the godly issues. They are discussing questions like, are the gods happy with us? Well, they are discussing God, because Purohita is the chief priest of this Grama. After this, we have the Gramini. Who is that? Well, he is the village headman, and he is talking to the Rajan about, are the cows in our village healthy? He is talking about all the village related issues with the Rajan. And finally, we have the Sunani. Who is the Sunani? Well, the Sunani is the commander-in-chief, and he is talking to the Rajan, and he is asking questions like, is our army ready to fight the enemy village? Well, from this you can understand that the Rajan was not completely independent, and he had to be accountable to the people. As you see, in this day and age, our Prime Minister cannot take any important decisions by himself, right? He needs to talk to the chief ministers and the legislators of our people, right? Similarly, back in that day and age, the Rajan could not take any decisions by himself. He needed to talk to the Sabha of important village elders. These were the most important people in the Grama, and he had to take their advice. Other than that, there was also the Samithi of tribal members. This group consisted of all the people in the tribe, and everyone was allowed to visit such Samithi meetings, and so the Rajan was accountable to the people. As people today have to work to take care of their children, similarly the Aryans also had to do the same, but they weren't office goers. So what did they do? Well, they were, as we have already found out, tribal nomadic people. So they searched and looked for new places to settle down and for livelihood, right? And their main occupation was not agriculture. Imagine you have to plant seeds at one place and then you have to pluck each one by one just so that you can plant them at another place. That sounds hectic, right? Well, this is why these Aryans were not into agriculture at all. In fact, their main occupation was cattle rearing, and that is also how they gained their food. They raised animals like sheep, cows, oxen, and goats, which became symbols of wealth, and we will learn about this later. So we have found out that they were tribal nomadic people, right? Just searching for food and water. So why did they decide to settle here in the Sapta Sindhu region? Well, this was because once they came to the Sapta Sindhu region, they found 7 huge rivers here, and they decided that this was a great place to stay because the land was fertile and they could grow their own crops. This is why they stayed here, because of the regular water supply from the rivers, and they also found animals in the nearby forest. And they saw that because of the rivers, there was fertile soil supporting agriculture. So now they did not need to go to other places for food and water, right? This is why they came here. And how did this begin their agricultural journey? Well, the Aryans cultivated crops like barley, rice, and wheat, things that people even in this day and age grow in India. But I told you that cattle was important to these people, right? Why so? Maybe in movies you have seen people fighting for money. Well, the cow was the currency of early Vedic age. And every Aryan measured his strength and pride based on the number of cows that he had. These cows were used for plowing fields, and they also reared them. So we can understand how important cows were to these people, right? Apart from that, land was taken for cultivating and also for rearing, but it did not come under private property. However, cows did come under private property. So this tells us how important cows exactly were, right? In fact, the Aryan tribes back in those days even fought against each other to loot each other's cows in battles known as Gavishti. Which makes sense, right? Each Aryan tribe will want to get more and more land so they can cultivate there and have their own houses built on them. So it's very normal. So even though we find that these people were really simple, we are glad that you don't have to worry about such dangerous Gavishti fights today. So now that we know that, can you answer which animal was considered important during the early Vedic period? A. Cows, B. Goats, C. Dogs, or D. Cats? Well, the correct answer is A. Cows. Cows were important back in that day. So now, Aryans needed things other than food, right? So let's read more about it now. Firstly, there was a lot of carpentry back in that day and age. And what did they make? Well, they made wooden plows. And apart from that, they also built such beautiful chariots for both war and peacetime activities. Other than that, Aryans were also famous for weaving clothes back in that day, and they used to make really beautiful decorative clothes. But that's not all. They also did leather work. Even their bows needed strings. Strings were made out of leather. Take a look at this picture here. Do you see what this is? Well, this vessel or this bag sort of thing is made out of leather, and it has water inside of it. So we can see that this is like an early Vedic age water bottle. Isn't that amazing? Well, lastly, they also did pottery, and these pots, just like these, were used to store grains and also for ritualistic purposes. They were made out of clay, and you can even find such pots in the museums today. So, if you think that the Aryans were all work and no play, you're a bit wrong. Just like we have to our recreational activities such as cricket and PUBG, similarly, Aryans also had their own recreational activities. So what did they do? Well, they had such activities like horse racing, chariot racing, even hunting in the forest and gambling. But that's not all. From several excavations, such musical instruments like harp, drums, kartal, flute, lute, and even Ravanhata have been found. This tells us how the Vedic people enjoyed music. Don't you think this is simply amazing? Well, Take a look at the Ravanhatha. Doesn't it look like an instrument that modern people play in this day and age? Well, yes, it does resemble a violin, right? So this is just great. Now, after our party with flutes and lutes is over, we have to go back home or else our parents will scold us, right? As it turns out, even in the early Vedic age, family was very strict. It was patriarchal society, which meant that the houses or the homes were headed by eldest male family member, be it grandfather or our fathers. So this does not mean women were not significant. In fact, women tended to religious functions. This also tells us that even though it was a patriarchal society during the early Vedic age, women held significant position in the society. In fact, they were also allowed to attend religious functions and even political functions such as sabhas and samithis, and they also got educated. Not just that, they were also allowed to select their own husbands by the practice of swayamvara. Not just that, they even provided economically to their families by activities such as needlework and weaving. But that's not all. There are even some important female figures from that day and age. For example, take a look at this picture. This is Rishika Gargi, and she sometimes posed such difficult philosophical questions that even other rishis could not solve them. Take a look at this picture. This shows us a very famous debate, great philosophical debate between Rishika Gargi, this woman, and Rishi Yajnavalkya, or this guy. Rishi Yajnavalkya's wife, whose Maitri, was another one of the female philosophers of that day and age, who along with Gargi and other unknown female scholars of the period contributed hymns to the Rig Veda. All of this shows us that the women were not looked down upon and they had their own significant roles in this society. So tell me, have you ever heard about the phrase unity in diversity? Do you know what it means? Well, when it comes to India, it means that we the people of India are so diverse, and that is exactly what makes us strong. But when during the early Vedic period, the Aryans came from outside and started settling in India, they saw some people here who were the Dasas, and they were dark skinned. So just based on their skin color, they decided to discriminate against them after they defeated them, right? And a new system was created, which was the Varna system, in which the Dasas were discriminated against based on their color, race, and tribe, which was a very bad system, and no one should follow this in this day and age. But after some time passed, this Varna system took a new form. This became the caste system, which is even there present in society in this day and age. In this caste system, there was social division based on different occupations, and this came up using jatis or castes. So Varna system became or changed into caste system with time, and people started using both of them interchangeably. So now let's learn more about this Varna system, which can be understood with the help of this pyramid here, with the people on top given the most importance and people at the bottom given the least importance, right? So let's begin at the top. Well, first you can see the Brahmans. These were the priests or messengers of the divine, engaged in conducting rituals and reciting mantras. So they did everything godly and they were considered close to God. This is exactly why they held so much importance in that society. Now, next in line came the Shatrias. Who were they? Well, they were the kings and the rulers and the warriors, soldiers protecting the people and going into wars. So, hence they were important because they were the leaders, right? Next came the Vaishyas, who were the common people, like farmers, craftsmen, providing food and useful objects to the society. So, they were considered useful. But lastly, there were the Shudras. Who were the Shudras? Well, they were the Dasas or the Aryans who had broken any laws. They were considered absolutely useless, only used for serving these other three classes. They were really discriminated against and had the worst jobs. But even after that, we get to learn that people could easily move from one Varna to another as per their function in the society. So we can understand from this thing that the Varna system back in that day and age in the early Vedic society specifically was not rigid. In fact, it was very flexible and people were even allowed to change from one varna to the other. Now let's talk about the early Vedic age, religion. Back in that day, what happened is that people were really confused about gods. So they used to look for God in their surroundings. They found God in different things related to nature. So once they could not understand it, they turned these into gods, such as Agni, who was the god of fire, Vayu, god of wind, and Indra, god of rain and king of gods. He was the most important one, but there were even other gods in this. For example, there were even female goddesses such as Usha and Aditi. But this being a patriarchal society, they weren't given as much importance as the male gods. But were the people in early Vedic society going to temples like we do today? Well, see, the thing is that even though people following Hinduism today go to temples, back in that day, there weren't any temples. And there was also not the concept of idol worshipping. Why is it so? Well, this is because Hinduism, as we know in this day and age, had started developing during the early Vedic period. This is why, because that age was simple, there weren't any temples or the concept of idol worshipping. Other than that, during this early Vedic period, the Aryans also preserved collections of religious and literary works by memorizing, reciting, and passing them down from one generation to the other. It is important to understand the fact that they just did it with the power of their mind. Back in that day, there weren't any copies or textbooks or pens and paper, right? So what they did is that they memorized the entire Vedas, then passed it down to their pupil, and when the pupil got old, he later passed it down to his other pupil. So this chain reaction went on happening, and from one generation to the next, the Vedas were passed without any copies or any written documents. This is what happened, and these were the Rig Veda. Well, firstly, only the Rig Veda was composed during the early Vedic time, which was written in Sanskrit, and it had a lot of mythological tales and family trees of gods and goddesses, among other stories. Now let's do a quick recap on the early Vedic society. Well, it started when a group of nomadic tribal people came and decided that this was the perfect place to settle in. After this, they started growing crops like barley. They even started crafts like pottery, leather making, and several other crafts such as carpentry also emerged. Next, what happened is that we realized that they had a king who was elected by the people. He was likable and respected by the people, and he even got Bali. After this, let's talk about the religion of that time. Well, we understood that they all worshipped nature, and their gods included gods like Agni, Vayu, and Rudra. For recreational activities, they had several different activities such as chariot racing, horse racing, gambling, and even playing musical instruments such as the flute and the lute. And lastly, families were led by men and women, but that did not mean that women did not have freedom, right? Women had a lot of independence back in that day and age. They were allowed to marry whoever they liked. They even were allowed to get educated, and they could attend religious and political meetings and contribute economically to their houses, families, right? So we understand that women were not suppressed in that society. But lastly, a new system emerged, which was the Varna system, which was a very bad system that is still there prevalent in the society by another name called the caste system. So with that, we can understand that the early Vedic society was very much a happy place to be in. So we see that the early Vedic age was kind of a progressive age, and people lived in harmony and unity. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free on DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app and get easy access to more than 5,000 amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million-plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and get a chance to win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So, at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So, register for free now.